Oh, this is gonna be crazy. Whoa, 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 that was great.
Alright, hello everyone and welcome today to another edition of SpraynPray1000's Verdict. I am SpraynPray1000 and today I'll be shutting off my fan so that way it doesn't interfere. But today is a good day. Today we're going to talk about what I think is one of the more interesting games that I played all year. Today I'm going to talk about Assassin's Creed Unity, which is the counterpart to Assassin's Creed Rogue, which came out in 2014. And my experiences with it, what I think about it, and contrasting with Rogue. Now remember, Rogue is in the line of Black Flag, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, where it has a very naval-based kind of combat system. A lot of it is sailing from point A to point B, exploring this big naval open world, interacting with other ships, as well as the traditional person-to-person combat of Assassin's Creed, scaling different buildings. And Rogue was pretty interesting because it was kind of a combination of Black Flag, which featured a lot of exotic locales, a lot of colonies, a lot of, environments in 18th century North America, which was still very, unsettled. Still a lot of wilderness, etc., etc. And Rogue borrows heavily from that, while also having, some major areas, that are pretty urban, urban for the 18th century, pretty, clustered, pretty impactful, kind of like Black Flag in a sense, but, more along the lines of the Ezio kind of trilogy. And, here we have Unity, which is kind of the antithesis of that, going back to some traditional Assassin's Creed roots of being in a big city. Basically, the closest thing I could contrast this to would be like Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, where in Brotherhood you spent the entire game in the city of Rome and you would do some extra things here and there. Unity kind of does the same thing. You spend the entirety of the game in Paris and two other small areas, and from there, the entirety of the game takes place. So, despite being inside one city, the scope of Paris is gigantic. It is colossal how big the city of Paris is, and that's one of the main things I like about this game, is that even though it's it's contained to basically one area and one gigantic area and two smaller areas, they do a good job of making sure that the scope of it is never seems small. Every time it seems like I'm running around different places. Even if I'm going to the same general area, there's always a bunch of different ways you can get there, be it parkouring, running in the streets, sliding over stuff. There are, and since it's a city, there's a bunch of towns or a bunch of houses and whatnot. Most of those houses you can actually run through. Like, you can actually free run through them. And unlike Assassin's Creed 3, where a lot of these houses were only used to, like, break off from your pursuers, which was something that they kind of brought in for 3, but they didn't really do much with it, and they eventually kind of lost it for 4 and Rogue. It's there in this game. Like, you can freely run through a lot of these buildings. They have upstairs. You can climb in from the rooftops if they have open skylights. You can climb in from balconies, from windows, and I really like that about this game. Just the fact that, they really kind of did a lot of work on that, and I enjoy doing that and seeing that, that, okay, I'm not just bound only to the streets. I'm liking that about some of these games nowadays, where you can actually freely go into buildings as well as around and on top and underneath them. Also, just Paris in general has an underground that's pretty massive that you can do, you can use to go from point A to point B, although that's a little more generic. It's more, just sewers and cisterns and, nothing major. There's a variety of missions and side missions in this game, and that's what I really think, that's one of the reasons why I really like Assassin's Creed, although that's also one of the things that I really, really think this game should pride itself on. is the variety of, okay, so you have your basic story missions, which are just, okay, you're following the story of Arno Dordion and, his time during the French Revolution. But in addition to that, there's co-op missions. In addition, and there's two types of co-op missions. There's I forget what the first type is, but there's also heists and one other type. And there's Paris stories, which are stories from famous people from Paris, from history. There's murder mysteries, which are my personal favorite, which are kind of like a whodunit kind of thing, where you have to investigate evidence, you have to kind of piece it together, formulate what happened in your own mind, and use evidence to accuse the right person of the crime. There's, the typical kind, well, there's no checkpoint missions, I should say. I was about to say there were, but there are none. It's just really good to see that there's all these different things. There's obviously the usual collectible missions that you can do, or well, they're not really missions, but you can collect tons of chests. There's, a bunch of stuff hidden in Paris. There's Enigma missions, which are like these, kind of similar to the Glyph missions, although these are more riddle-based as opposed to puzzle-based. Which are, they're kind of the same thing as the ones from the Ezio trilogy, where you would examine glyphs and you would do like 10, 15, or 30-minute long puzzles of how to figure out this ultimate, revelation. I didn't do too many of those, and I'll get into that. I didn't do too many of the side missions for this game, and I'll get into that in a little bit. The other thing that I do like is, obviously since you're in this big city, this big, gigantic environment, that has multiple levels and, tons of stuff to do in it and tons of collectibles. It's important to have a map that accurately displays stuff like that. And there is a three-dimensional map in the game. And it loads instantly. So basically what happens is when you push the map button while out and about in Paris, it'll zoom out to give you a whole map of Paris. Obviously it'll unload every texture and everything. You kind of get, of course, you have to fill in the viewpoints, but when you do so, it zooms out to show you all these different areas. It shows every building, every street. It shows you, like, let's say an objective is on the 3rd floor of a building. If you adjust the camera to show you, the actual building in question, it'll show you on the 3rd floor. That it'll highlight a box. So the map is in 3D, which is pretty sick, and I like that because it really helps out when you're trying to figure out where something is, etc., etc. And instead of saying, "Oh, well, I have no clue. Is it above me? Is it below me?" It really helps when you can see that very clearly on the map, and the map is pretty helpful. You can also set waypoints, which is also helpful. But yeah, it loads instantly. By the way, it's not like it's a separate screen. Like, as I said, you literally zoom out and the map appears instantly. And then once you're done looking around or doing whatever you need to do, you just hit the button again. You go right back to where Arno is. It literally zooms right into where he is on the map, which is pretty sick. I like that. Yeah, so that's good. The fact that it loads instantly. The assassination mission. So basically, and this is going to be a running point of this whole verdict. Assassin's Creed Unity does something that I really think is interesting and unique. It goes back to the traditional Assassin's Creed 1 type of doing assassinations. So basically, throughout the story, the typical Assassin's Creed story is that you are an assassin and you have to figure out, there's some overarching plot, and basically, you have to do what an assassin does. You have to assassinate Templars who are, in the story and doing things that you don't like. And that's basically the major emphasis of this game, is that you're playing as this guy and, you need to do that. So the assassination missions are pretty cool. I like that. I like what they do. What they do is they basically start you on a rooftop. They give you a little cutscene at the beginning where Arno examines the area in question. He zooms in on various things that can be used to his advantage. So, for example, in one mission, there might be a bunch of prisoners held hostage, and if you, Arno will highlight that, hey, they're trapped in there. Maybe you can go rescue them and enlist their help, and they'll create a prison break. And they'll maybe kill some guards for you, or they'll create a distraction. Another instance is you can maybe there's a guy driving a cart of wine around. Maybe you can go poison the wine bottle. That'll just take care of the guy that you need to kill. It's stuff like that really helps out and is really, really cool. And I like that about this game. Also, the economy system returns, similar to Rogue. The economy system returns. And it's a bit more simplified in this game. Instead of running around to every corner of the map, trying to put stuff together and renovate buildings. Instead, it's more condensed. There are 5 upgrades you can do for your cafe, which is basically your base in this game. And each mission obviously is a harder than the last, but once you complete them, you get a big boost by buying mini cafes called social clubs out and about the city. You can also increase that. You can increase your revenue by doing their missions. You can increase it further. So basically, instead of running around and constantly upgrading in every little thing, it's a bit simpler. It's more refined. It's less about, oh well, do you have the money to buy this and this and this and this and this, which was kind of what they did for the Ezio trilogy. You would run around, renovate stuff, buy paintings, and basically you would invest money. It's kind of like what you do with money. You invest money now. Okay, maybe you lose 500 florins or 500 francs now, but later on this business will over time make you more money than what you invested, and it'll add to your total income. So I'm really glad that the economy system returns, because it really helps out when you're trying to make money. You just make you make a set income every 20 or 15 minutes. And you can increase that amount. So instead of having to do missions and everything, you make a set amount of money just by playing the game, which is pretty sweet. Now, one of the biggest gameplay changes that I really loved is in Assassin's Creed, parkour has always been a staple of the series. Parkouring around these various historical towns and temples and cities and all these other locations and locales is really good. But there's always been a problem with it, and it's that it's always easy to go up, but incredibly hard to go down. And when I say that, I mean that it's okay, it's great you climb to the top of this ancient temple, but how the hell are you going to get down? It's and the controls for that have always been a little bit clunky and a little weird and a little bit hard to do. Basically, you have to drop consistently by pressing B and timing your button pushes so that you don't land too hard or break your legs. Typically what they do in Assassin's Creed is they have like a bundle of hay or a hay wagon or some kind of leaves or something that you can jump down into that will cushion your fall, and you can safely get down to ground level. But like, let's say you only want to go down a certain amount as opposed to all the way down to ground level, or let's say you're up a certain thing that doesn't specifically have a contextual object that you can jump into. This game introduces one of the coolest things they've ever put in an Assassin's Creed game, which is the free run down. Free run down is so incredibly impressive. Basically what they did is they changed the free running system from just holding R2 or RT to parkour up and basically go into high profile to do parkouring. Instead, now they've added something called parkour up, or well, it's not called that in the game. It's called free run up and free run down. And essentially, if you want to climb something now, you have to hold an extra button, which is X, while holding down RT or R2, or A if you're on Xbox. Obviously it's console specific to do that, and you have to hold circle or B while holding R2 or RT to go down something, and that's really helpful. Of course, the free running going into high profile and running around is still the same as before. It's just if you want to climb something, that can affect it. And obviously, like, let's say you're on a ledge, if you do free run up to jump, you will jump farther than if you were to just hold free run period with no up or down. And if you are to parkour down, obviously you wouldn't jump, you would fall a bit more. And it's really helpful because it basically ensures that you'll safely fall down from something or safely parkour down, and the computer will control it and automatically do it for you, which is pretty sweet. And I like it, and it actually makes things a lot easier to go down now, because you can fall a bit more than you can climb, and the game will automatically detect that. The game also does a better job of acknowledging when you're in combat. Now, ever since Assassin's Creed 3, the combat system has been made a bit more fluid than it was before. The game will automatically detect when you're in combat and appropriately transition your character into combat mode as opposed to standard free running mode. And I like that because that was a problem I had in Assassin's Creed 4. That was a problem I had in Rogue, and was a major problem I had in 3, was that sometimes enemies will be approaching you, they're ready to attack you, but your character, for whatever reason, is still in free roam mode instead of combat mode, and they would get cheap hits, combos on you when you can't do anything, because if your character isn't in combat mode, you can't counter, you can't attack enemies, and that was really annoying, and I didn't like that about this game. About those games. Well, it was a minor thing about those games and a major thing in AC3, and I like that they did that in this game. I only think I had one instance where the game did not properly detect me in combat mode. There was something else I wanted to throw in that I really liked, and I can't remember it for the life of me right now, and I'm gonna have to apologize. But yeah. So that's the good about this game, and we're only on gameplay right now. That's the good about this game. You know, and especially the assassination missions are really good, because they're diverse, they're fun, and they're almost like Hitman. You know, where there's a lot of different, well, not a lot, but there's certain avenues, as opposed to just run in, kill everyone, and you know, basically beat down the guy that you need to kill. Unfortunately, in this game, one thing that they did change is it's very similar to Assassin's Creed 1, where you have to assassinate the person in question. You know, you can't just beat them down with a sword and accomplish it the same way. You have to actually physically run over there and hit them with their assassination. And, you know, that's all right. You know, it's nothing too major. That's definitely none of the bad things about this game. They also changed eagle vision, I might add. Instead of it being what it kind of is in Assassin's Creed, you know, 3, 4, Rogue. Instead, it's more similar to the Ezio and Altair games, where you can run around with it. Basically, it's a pulse that travels outward from you that will paint enemies, and you can see them through walls, and you can do things with that. You can mark targets as before, so a lot of stuff returns unchanged. But, you know, now let's get into the negatives. I mean, I've said a lot of good things about this game, but there's a lot of negatives, and unfortunately, that's kind of where this game goes downhill. Sticking with gameplay, and I'll get into the other things in a minute, this game suffers from long loading times. Now, not insanely long, but definitely noticeably long loading. And it's a little annoying at points where, you know, it's a simple, short, like, let's say you watch a 1-minute cutscene. Great, now let's have, you know, 1 minute worth of loading so you can get on to the next cutscene or the next thing. And it adds up. And it's something I noticed right away that I was kind of hoping was just, you know, a first-time booting kind of deal, but it persisted throughout the game. This game suffers from pretty long loading. There is a lot of stuff to load, I understand, but at the same time, it does really break the flow of the game. You know, especially when there's a critical cutscene or a critical thing you want to do in a mission, this game does tend to take long times to load. Additionally, this game suffers from a choppy frame rate at points. Now, I am playing this game. I should have noted this initially, and I'll probably have to put it in the video description, that I am playing this game after the 4th patch, I believe, came out, which supposedly was what fixed all this other stuff, and, you know, fixed the frame rate and fixed faces disappearing. So none of that happened in my playthrough. But unfortunately, this game suffers from a choppy frame rate at points. Now, it's only at specific points where, like, there's a decent amount of people on the screen, but nonetheless, it still suffers, and it really hinders gameplay when they do so. And unfortunately, that's something I will have to detract from this game. This game, even though I did praise the free running about a minute ago, the free running still falls victim to the same problems that it had before. Which is that the parkour is clunky. Now, free run up and then free run down are incredibly intuitive and incredibly well done when they work. When they don't work, it's a problem. And for me, I feel like it doesn't work too often. And now, Assassin's Creed, I know, has never really had a perfect parkour system. You have these open worlds with just too much stuff to grab onto or hang from and run across and jump off of. But this game really, really lacks in that aspect. And it really gets frustrating at some points when you're trying to, you know, do some particularly deft motions or be, you know, particularly speedy or accomplish certain things. And it's kind of annoying when you get to that moment and, you know, he just won't jump to the ledge 2 feet to the right or left of him. That can be very, very annoying. And because of that, going hand in hand with the clunky parkour is the sticky controls and the sticky combat. Now, a lot of times what happens in Assassin's Creed, and one of the things that they really did in Assassin's Creed that made it really stand out from other games, I feel, that maybe even some games like, well, actually, never mind. But the thing is that what they do in Assassin's Creed is you fight large groups of enemies at once at some times. Some points, you might fight one or two guys here or there at once. You'll be a 1-on-2. But sometimes it can grow to like a 1-on-4, 1-on-6, maybe 1-on-10 kind of deal. And in a situation like that, it's kind of like, I parallel this to like the Batman Arkham series, where you need to be able to free flow from one enemy to the next. To be able to, okay, this enemy's coming in to counter, but I want to keep hitting this enemy. I need to do something special to this enemy. And it's kind of not the best. And I say this because this game kind of goes back to the Ezio style of fighting, which was very different from the Assassin's Creed 3 and 4 style of fighting, and it kind of tries to blend them both, and it really ends up being like a very gray paste. It doesn't really take the best of both, and it ends up, being very sticky. So you'll be attacking someone, and some guy will come up from behind you, and you'll push the counter button, and your character will just keep on doing what he's doing and get hit. And it becomes increasingly harder to break out of enemy combos, which is problematic. And it is a little annoying when you do just get comboed and comboed and comboed again and again, and you can't get out of it. That does begin to get annoying. Also, the fact that you can't really, they separated dodging and parrying instead of just having one entire button. And unfortunately, I feel that the dodge is kind of worthless because it really doesn't get you too much distance, and enemies will just kind of follow you as you try to get away from them. And really, it only works on certain enemies if you are really, really close to them. But if you're really far away, they tend to just step with you. Also, animations really don't play too well in combat, I feel they're kind of off touch. A lot of times, even during stealth missions, the game will really awkwardly drag guys over to be killed, and it is kind of the problem that's always been with Assassin's Creed. So it's not just exclusive to this game, but you'll slit someone's throat or something, and your sword will be over there, and his throat will be over there, squirting blood the wrong way. And then there'll be times where you'll be looting a guy, but because Arno hasn't put his sword away, his hand will start wobbling, and you'll hear the sword start ricocheting all over the place because his hand is supposed to do one motion, and because he's holding the sword he can't, so the hand is going crazy. And it's just really, really weird stuff, in addition to the fact that the combat feels a lot worse than Assassin's Creed 4 and Rogue. I feel they spent a lot of time after Assassin's Creed 3 really perfecting the fast-paced combat, and this time around they just kind of dropped the ball on it. The whole point of Assassin's Creed 3 and 4 and Rogue all having fast-paced combat was that it's not like the Ezio line where all you would do is wait, parry, step, and then beat the shit out of someone, which was very slow. They took some of the stuff from that, and then they improved on it, and they made the combat more fast-paced, which in 3 I didn't think was very well done, but in 4 and Rogue I thought was pretty good. I liked it. Now, of course, one could argue that the game became way too easy in Assassin's Creed Rogue and Assassin's Creed 4, where basically all you had to do was wait for someone to attack you, press the counter button, and then start insta-killing everyone around you because of something called an execution streak. Well, in this game, that doesn't really work. You have to time your counters, which is fine. I can understand if they don't want the counter to be an insta-kill, but they got rid of all the stuff that made dealing with groups of 10 or more enemies manageable. In Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed 1, you would have these long, drawn-out sword fight engagements that really, really weren't too well done and weren't too good. It was very slow, repetitive combat, and immediately in Brotherhood they changed that system. Now in Brotherhood they added something called an execution streak, where once you would kill one enemy, all you would have to do is point your movement stick towards the next enemy and press the attack button, and you would insta-kill that enemy, so on and so forth. Of course, it doesn't work on every enemy. Certain enemies like heavies and agile swordsmen, that archetype of a character, and bosses would either only take damage or could not be harmed at all by those moves. So it's not like it was a kill all button, you know, and obviously enemies would still try to attack you while you're in this streak. And, you know, if you interrupt it for whatever reason, you lose the ability to insta-kill. But it made dealing with 10 enemies at once a lot simpler than having to individually kill every enemy at once. Now, what they do in Unity is they remove that. They also remove, you know, the fast-paced element of countering and, you know, killing enemies really quickly. And instead, what they did is they made everything more reliant on equipment level and equipment, how many diamonds an equipment has, basically measuring its level. So obviously, if you have a higher level sword, it kills enemies of that level or lower pretty quickly. And Arno has a level. Every enemy has, you know, a level which is denoted by stars above their heads, or not stars, diamonds above their heads. And, you know, obviously, if you have a level 4 sword, it's really easy to kill everything below level 4 pretty quickly, but you're still going to struggle a bit with level 5s. They also removed the ability to instant kill using smoke grenades. They also removed... Oh, by the way, the one thing I forgot to mention was the stealthing is great in this game. I absolutely love the fact that there's stealth. It's really, really cool that they added it. You know, that now you can crouch, you can not be heard, you can take cover. The problem is that, one, you can't really swap cover too easily, which is kind of ironic because these are the same people that make Splinter Cell, where, you know, Splinter Cell is obviously, you know, you can crouch, you can go from cover to cover. Even Watch Dogs has a pretty impressive stealthing segment, or stealth mechanics back in May of last year. You can't move bodies anymore, so you can't hide the evidence. They just completely removed that. That's just completely gone. There's no like throwing knives or anything anymore. Instead, you get something called the Phantom Blade, which is basically what is the word I'm thinking of? A projectile throwing knife that you launch from your hidden blade. It's really not that good. It's really kind of something that's just like a cool little thing to show on advertisement. I feel that it's kind of not helpful. It really doesn't kill enemies that much. You kind of have to mandatorily headshot them. So if you're trying to stealth, it's not exactly the best thing that you can use really quickly and quietly to take, well, quietly, yeah, but not quickly to take out someone. While I do think the aiming is a bit more solid, it doesn't really lend itself too well. And it really, a lot of these things, like, you know, the gun and whatever, cannot really be used efficiently in combat, I feel. Even though you can quick fire, and I do like the fact that they did make the pistols a bit better than they were in Rogue and Unity, Rogue and AC4, it's not really too good, and I don't like it that much. Also, I already talked about the animations being... Some animations are too short, by the way. Like, the animation for doing a dash attack in this game only plays out for about a second, and then if an enemy is further from Arno than that, he'll just freeze and they'll just kind of take damage, even if he doesn't physically touch them. So it's not like he slides across the ground. He'll just stop whatever he's doing, and the enemy will just take damage. It looks really weird. The enemy AI is also a little bit clunky, although it's somewhat weird, although not too much. I feel that, you know, especially when it comes to combat, sometimes they'll be incredibly smart, other times they won't. That's a little bit here or there. That's a more of a minor complaint. They removed a lot of stuff from combat, as I said. You know, a lot of the stuff that they spent a lot of time working on and you know, improving upon and adding up, you know, across all these other previous Assassin's Creed games, they kind of got rid of. And I'm not really sure what they were, you know, going for with that. You know, whether it be items or mechanics that you could do. I'm not really sure about that. Also, for stealthing, in addition to not being able to move bodies, you also cannot whistle to attract enemy attention, which is something that they've been working on since Assassin's Creed 3. They just decided to throw away this time, and I'm really kind of confused as to why they would do that. Also, I think this game places way too much emphasis on co-op, although that might be something I might want to aim more at the developers as opposed to, you know, the game itself. I feel that the developers focused a little too much on co-op for this game, which kind of detracted from some of the other aspects of it, and they didn't really improve upon that too much. Also, this game is not as free roam heavy as Assassin's Creed's before it. You really can't, because you need to get lockpicking skills to really open doors and open chests and whatnot around Paris, and you really don't get the ability to open everything until Sequence 10. And it would be one thing if, like, okay, you know, level 3 doors only exist in high-level areas, but level 3 doors are in every area, including the early game ones. So you really can't completionist, or you really can't run around, and do stuff your way until basically sequence 10, the game really kind of holds your hand. I mean, you're going to run across a lot of chests that kind of are locked, and you have to wait until later. So I mean, yeah, you could do everything that, that's appropriate to your level, but it wouldn't be as efficient as if, okay, now you can lockpick everything, now just go wild. You can only have to do one lap around Paris if you want, instead of 3 or 2 or however many you want to do. Another problem is they put microtransactions and the companion app mandatorily in this game. And it's something that they did for Rogue, albeit minor. They had microtransactions if you wanted to, like, say, fill in everything on your map or whatever, which is really kind of silly because you could just do the viewpoint and, you wouldn't have to pay that much money. I don't know who would buy that. But this game, they threw in something called Helix points. And basically, if you don't feel like earning the money to buy an equipment or unlock it by playing a mission or using Creed points, which you get by doing just about anything in the game, to upgrade it, you could just simply buy it using real-world money, which then gets turned into Helix points. And basically, you can spend a shit ton of money on Helix points, and really, it's not worth it. It's just another way of, you can pay to win if you really want to. You don't actually have to put the time and effort into actually beating the game. That's what I mean. It's pay to win. Like, if you have the $50 lying around, you can basically buy the Helix points and hack it in, and you don't have to actually work for it. And it's kind of a sad thing. I really hope this is something that does not stick around at all. It kind of really detracts from the game, I feel. Also, the fact that there's no mad chests. Like, there's some chests in Paris you can't open unless you're doing the companion app. Now, I know this has been around for about a year or so. I know, I think Watch Dogs had a companion app. I know Metal Gear Solid 5 will have one. I know GTA 5 had one. I don't really like it. It has a way bigger presence, I feel, in this game than in any other game so far. Basically, there are certain chests in Paris you can only open if you play it. I have not played it. I don't know anything about it because I'm not here to review mobile games. I am here to review video games, actual console games. And I feel that it's very annoying. And again, this is another trend that I hope... It's fine if you want to have a companion app, but don't make it a mandatory part of the game. I think that really detracts from the game, and I'm not sure what they were going for with that. And one thing that I can't really prove, I didn't really do too much testing, was that PlayStation Network was down in the latter half of December 2014, and while I was trying to play the campaign, my game would simply refuse to load missions. Now, it would be one thing if the game just outright refused to load, say, a multiplayer mission or something along those lines. And, it'd be another thing if the game just absolutely decided that, hey, you just cannot do anything online. That's fine. But at least let me play the story. Like, at least let me play single-player missions. Missions that Ubisoft and the developers themselves specified in the game are one-player max, meaning single-player only. There can be no two-player. There's no online. There's no reason to connect to a server. So for whatever reason, I was unable to even play single-player missions, which doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know if it's like that. If I were to unplug it, turn off my internet and just, put in the game and play it normally if that was PlayStation or whatnot. But that was very frustrating. I don't understand, why a game needs to have, like, why does the single player missions have to mandatorily have internet, requirements? Again, there's a lot of trends I'm seeing in this game that I'm not liking. And, it's not so much, it's something about Assassin's Creed. It's more something that the devs are putting in. They're focusing too much on all these other extraneous bits as opposed to the core of the game. The core meat of Assassin's Creed has always been its single player. The good narrative experience of the Assassins versus Templars, the multitude of things that you can do in the single player campaign. And that's why I like Rogue so much. And 4 is one of my favorite games of all time. Not only is it one of my game of the year for 2013, but Rogue is Rogue. 4 is just one of my favorite games of all time, just because of how well it does the single player and how engrossed I was in that game. So I've kind of talked about the game. Oh, and also the one thing that does not return is the assassin training that you can do in Calling Assassins, which is kind of weird because it's been around in some form since Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and even though it's kind of been toned down in 4 and Rogue, for whatever reason they just omitted it entirely in this game. I guess they kind of melded in with co-op, you know, you play with other real-world people, but I miss that. I miss that mechanic. I miss that aspect. It's what really made Brotherhood one of my favorite games of the series. But I've talked at length about the gameplay. Oh, also, you can't use the hidden blade in combat anymore. You're mandatorily forced to use a sword, but I just want to throw that out there. You know, you take that as you will. Bearing in mind that, of course, you've always been able to use the hidden blade in combat since Assassin's Creed 2. So really, the story, I'm just going to really kind of, because this is obviously going to be one of the longest verdicts I've ever done, because there's so much to talk about. The story of this game is pretty interesting, especially considering that, you know, it ties in with Rogue. However, I feel that the tie-ins with Unity, between Unity and Rogue, are more on the Rogue side. Rogue makes a couple of references, not, you know, a ridiculous amount, but a couple of references, including a couple key ones, especially at the end, towards Unity. And Unity basically acknowledges none of that, none of Rogue. So these are not like, you know, buddy and buddy games. You know, obviously Unity was meant to be the workhorse between the two, the one that would get more of the fame than anything else. And Rogue is just kind of the side project, really, which is about what they are. The Unity team did not do anything really to reference Rogue. The story of Arno, though, is at least interesting, I want to say. It's worth going into, and it's actually not bad at points. It's pretty interesting, especially with the assassination missions that I talked about. It's really a harken to the older Assassin's Creeds, I feel. And, you know, Arno's story is pretty similar to, say, Ezio's, to Edward Kenway's. And it's good. I like it. However, the problem is that the story turns generic at some points, you know, around the halfway point, and then the ending is just kind of bland and doesn't really leave anything. And, you know, it doesn't, and one of the bigger problems I have with the story is that not only is the ending kind of a, you know, a letdown and pretty disappointing, but it doesn't tie into what they've been trying to build up in Assassin's Creed for so long, which is this whole idea of the precursor races, and, you know, after the events of AC3, this hive conscious that now exists in Abstergo Entertainment's database, you know, the voice in the gray, all this other stuff that they were really, really working up to, they don't really explain in this game, you know, be it at the start or at the end. And I mean, maybe it's there in the database, but they really don't talk about it. And they definitely did not advance the voice in the gray plot line, you know, in the main story. So it's kind of like, well, what are you, like, is that plot line getting dropped? Like, what's going on with that? Because it was somewhat mentioned in, well, not somewhat, it was actually one of the major points of the collectibles in Rogue was to figure out this message that this voice is sending you, you know, kind of hyping it up, hinting at it, and really they kind of dropped the plot line in this game, and I'm kind of wondering, like, well, what about it? You know, this game revolves around the plot line of the artifacts and everything, and it's just kind of like, well, you don't really talk too much about it, you don't talk about the bigger thing. They kind of really took an established plot point from Assassin's Creed 4, and they kind of redid it again, and they really redid it in such a way that's kind of generic and not really, you know, that interesting. And so I'm kind of left wondering, well, like, what is with the story of this game? It feels like Unity is a very isolated game, you know, more so than Rogue, I should throw in. Unity is a very isolated game in, you know, in the franchise. Doesn't really tie in too much with the other games. You know, it doesn't really do too much of that. And it's kind of like, well, what are you, you know, what were you going for? You know, what are you trying to do? And I really feel that the story was a letdown because of that. I really feel that the ending was just kind of, okay, you know, it would be fine if this was a generic game, but, you know, this is a long-running franchise, you know, and it just feels like the story just really didn't go anywhere. You didn't really I mean, obviously, Arno's story, you know, has a start, a middle, and end, but in terms of the overarching plot line, the story really doesn't do too much. And now, obviously, let me get to the final part, the presentation. Graphically, this game is pretty good. You know, graphically, this game is well done. I like it, you know, especially considering that this is one of the more brutal Assassin's Creeds, taking place in a very brutal time in human history, the French Revolution. The music is all right, not as good as 4, not as good as Rogue, but the music is still pretty good. But But I mean, that's to be expected, and that's something I really, really have been thinking of these past couple of days. You know, it's to be expected that these franchises, you know, all these games are going to look better on these consoles. But don't tell me that that's the only reason why we got new consoles was for better graphics. Like, come on now, we have all this technology. Let's get these better loading times. Let's stop enemies and AI from changing their outfit right in front of me. Let's stop stuff from popping in. You know, let's, and obviously, I mean, you don't even really need it to be a video game. Like, fix the story. You know, like that's something that's completely irrelevant. So I think that the worst part, and I'm trying to wrap this up here in like the next 5 minutes, the worst part of Assassin's Creed Unity is it lacks identity. It doesn't know what it wants to be, whether it wants to be a throwback to Assassin's Creed 1, whether it wants to heavily take from Assassin's Creed 2, whether it wants to go along the lines of 3 and 4, and it doesn't really know what it wants to be. It ends up being, and I contrast this to Assassin's Creed 3 back when we were done with the Ezio trilogy. It really feels like it has such a different outlandish direction, which can be good, but in this case was not really implemented well. So that it really feels kind of isolated and awkward, I want to say. Arno himself is kind of like, I want to say, a bootleg Ezio. He's really not the best kind of protagonist. He's good. He's interesting, you know, to see his start, middle, end, you know, his rise to power and all this other stuff. But at the same time, I don't know. It just feels like this game doesn't really know what Assassin's Creed it wants to emulate the most. So it tries to take all the Assassin's Creeds and tries to take, I don't know if I would necessarily call it the best of all of them, but it definitely tries to borrow heavily from them. And I mean, I don't know, ultimately I kind of feel like they ended up taking not the worst from all of them. I mean, obviously it takes the best from some, the worst from some, and it just ends up being flat out average. It just ends up being that kind of game, you know, that's kind of a cash-in, I want to say. And I mean, it's not Force Unleashed 2 levels of cash-in, but it's certainly not anything like revolutionary, I would say. So, despite that, it is still a solid game. I mean, it still does have the Assassin's Creed spirit. Like, if you are looking for a single-player game to sink a lot of time into, that's good. You know, this game is right up your alley. You know, it's going to have DLC come out for it. It's going to be a pretty interesting game, I feel, in the future. However, unfortunately, I feel that just they really were, I don't know what they were going for. Like, they isolated the story pretty well, which I mean, I don't know. Like, you've had this plotline running since literally the first Assassin's Creed. Now you're going to suddenly throw it away. You know, I mean, they isolated the gameplay pretty well. The only thing, I mean, it just looks nice. You know, it plays pretty well. And even then, it has frame rate issues, you know, some laggy moments, long loading times. So there's all sorts of little gremlins that are in this game, and that ultimately contribute not necessarily to its downfall, but, you know, just in general, that just kind of take away from it, I feel. So ultimately, what would I give Assassin's Creed Unity? Well, I'm getting the feeling like this is going to be one of the last verdicts for 2014, or it might be the last verdict I do for 2014. And I just really want to say that I was disappointed with this game. I'm a big-time Assassin's Creed fan. You know, I love the franchise, and it's, you know, it's tied to my channel so much. But this game just kind of really felt soulless to me. It didn't really feel like they wanted to do too much with it or go anywhere with it. And I just don't know. I mean, to start off, well, not to start off the year, but to end 2014 with this verdict, even though it's already 2015, I'm disappointed. I mean, I started off 2014, you know, with a review of Black Flag, which was one of my favorite games of the year. And, you know, I did Liberations, which was okay. I did Rogue, which was also pretty strong and pretty good. But this game, I just really feel like I don't know what they were really thinking with it, and it's just average. Like, it's a pretty decent single player game, but it's just an average Assassin's Creed. So I'm gonna have to give it an average score, and I think I'm gonna give Assassin's Creed Unity for the PS4, which is the version I did play. I'm gonna give it a 79 out of 100. It's good at some points. It's stable at least now. Who knows what my verdict would have been if I played before the big 4 patches. You know, if I played this day 1, who knows what my verdict would be. Like, seriously, I'm being serious here. So this is after the 4 big patches. I started the playthrough, I don't really remember. I think I started like December 26th, and I ended it on December 30th. But this game, I don't know. So I'm going to leave it at that. You know, you guys can determine your own. I mean, definitely is worth picking up if you want a strong single-player game for the PS4. But if you're a big Assassin's Creed fan, you know, you're probably going to be disappointed. I mean, I don't know if it's worth skipping. At least it's worth a rent, maybe, or maybe even a used, or wait for it to be a little marked down in a price, or maybe get it with a bundle. I don't know. But that's going to be it. Assassin's Creed Unity gets a 79. And I hope Ubisoft really steps it up next time. So, thank you for this verdict. I'll see you for 2015. Take it easy.